I wanted to do a video on why I stand firm against the liberal death cult of environmentalism. Essentially, a friend of mine is a fan of this podcast, well, not podcaster, this YouTuber named Canadian Prepper. And he had some environmentalist kook on that's an ecologist and is talking about habitat loss and how all of humanity is allegedly going to die by 2030 and yada, yada, yada. And this is the same bullshit we've been being told since the 1950s. And I think what I want to point out here. Now, first I want to show I fall somewhere between Charles Manson and George Carlin with where I see environmentalism, okay? And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Now, everybody knows I love nature, I love conservation, but I am not a believer in the liberal death cult of environmentalism. I don't worship Al Gore. Al Gore is not my prophet or my saint, but I do believe in conservation, and I do believe in the need to preserve the natural environment and to enhance the natural environment. But I stand between Charles Manson and George Carlin, and we're going to start with Charles Manson. Where does Charles Manson stand on the environment? With atwa, air, trees, water, and animals.
In other words, the ways of animals I identify with more than I do with the ways of the humans. Humans are pretty stupid. Humans won't survive. Humans ain't going to survive. Not the way they're going.
Think they're going to destroy themselves?
Yeah, definitely. They're going to destroy every fucking thing. They're destroying everything. See, people don't realize how many... If you sit down and you started thinking people, it would take you 10 weeks to think up 200 million people, man. Do you know how many people that is? Now, you run out of food with 200 million people. You run out of oil with 200 million people. You run out of thought with 200 million people. You got a lot of meat there, man. That's a lot of meat to deal with, D. You know, I'm reaching for perfection, just like we all reach for perfection. But my perfection is in the air, the water, the trees, and the wildlife. And it goes beyond my physical. You see what I'm saying? In other words, they can't understand. I've already gave this physical up, man. The physical's hanging down there on the courtroom. You know, if you want to interview me, why don't you go talk to the DA? Maybe he can make up some more lies for you, some more stories for you. And here's another thing that you people talk about. All these peace movement, all these demonstrators, they'll run out and demonstrate for a nuclear power plant, go home and turn electricity on. If you want to demonstrate for a nuclear power...
Notice his point there. This is what's funny about that, is a lot of these hippy-dippy morons, they like to pretend that they're somebody they're not, and you'll see what he says. I'll let him talk about it, actually, because he does a better job of explaining it than I do in his Charles Manson sort of way.
Nuclear power plant don't use electricity. Does it make sense? You know what I'm saying? They want to demonstrate for something on one hand and get their faces up in the camera and like, look at me, I'm different, you know, or pay me to be somebody, you dig? And then on the other hand, they can't be somebody because they go home and turn the fucking electricity on and use the same fucking...
Now, you'll notice a lot of this with, as he put, pay me to be somebody. You'll see a lot of this with these influencers. You see a lot of this with the prepping community. You see a lot of this with a lot of these people. They want to be somebody else. They want to be that guy, if you know what I mean. But the point is, they're not that guy. Okay?
Fucking pollution. You dig what I'm saying? In other words, you can't protest cutting down trees with paperwork. You can't protest pollution riding around in automobiles. You dig? I told you 40 years ago, get back to the horse, man.
What's the best way to change things?
I get back to the horse. If you don't get back to the horse, there's going to be nothing left of you. Now, it's dawning in the minds of many. It's dawning in the minds of chemistry. It's dawning in the minds of biology. Anybody that wants to put order into the world, anybody that's got a brain that wants to put order into the world has got to stumble upon Hitler. Because Hitler started putting order into the world. And when he started putting order into the world, it threw him out, it overwhelmed him. It was too big for him. He couldn't do it. You dig? Nowadays, it's a different computer. If it's a different world, it's a different thought. Nowadays, you don't need all that explosive power. You can do it on your computers with your buttons and stuff, with your A's and B's, and with your biscuit berets and biscuit buttons. And Jackson wants to run to be president. Man, you better hope somebody wants to be president. You dig what I'm saying? But who in the hell would want to be? Can you conceive of what kind of brain would want to lead these fucking rook scoops out there? And because there's no communication with them. You dig? If you took a horsewhip and beat them, they still.
This is very important to understand this. This is the average. A lot of people can't understand this, and I think the problem is most people, this is the average person. You're going to hear him describe the average person. And I think it's an accurate description of the average person. The average person is not capable of any real thought. They're capable of following, but they are not capable of any original thought.
Wouldn't understand what the hell you're talking about because there's no intelligence there, man.
There's too many people.
Oh man, yeah. They'll pray for Hitler to come back. They'll wish he hadn't been here. They don't have the intelligence to change. Once you get them, they go, the rest of their life, They'll do that for a paycheck, You tell them, don't do that no more, and they go, There's no communication. You tell them, I told you, stop doing that. And they'll go, I said, stop it. And they'll go, and you cut someone's fucking throat and throw blood in their face, and they'll go, You see what I'm saying? In other words, there's just no intelligence, man.
You don't have any hope for mankind.
Not on that level. Not on that level.
Now, that's one of the important things to understand. Not on that level. Like Friedrich Nietzsche said, the beauty of man is not an end. Man is a bridge between ape and Ubermensch. But what we see going on now is we see man devolving back into a bunch of mindless, chattering apes and not really moving forward to Ubermensch. Although you see some people evolving toward Ubermensch, toward the Ubervolk. People that, a lot of the friends of mine that I've had over the years are the ones that are trying to spur forth human evolution. And what do you see from the masses? Oh, I'm against GMOs. GMOs are scary. Transhumanism is scary. The fourth industrial revolution is scary. They're trying to take away my soul. So that's one of the problems you have, is the average person is a complete idiot.
Oh, no. That's not mankind. That's not intelligence, It's not even beast. It don't have the intelligence of a zoo.
Exactly. As I said, I fall somewhere between Charles Manson and George Carlin. And here's what George Carlin has to say about saving the planet.
See, I'm not one of these people who's worried about everything. You got people like this around you. Country's full of them now. People walking around all day long, every minute of the day, worried about everything. Worried about the air, worried about the water, worried about the soil. Worried about insecticides, pesticides, food additives, carcinogens. Worried about radon gas, worried about asbestos. Worried about saving endangered species. Let me tell you about endangered species, all right? Saving endangered species.
I love how he explains this, because the problem is, what people don't understand is, do you know how many millions and millions of species went extinct prior to humankind even existing? Okay? Before humanity evolved, billions and billions of different life forms have gone extinct. Okay? And the idea that, if we just pay enough in monopoly money, carbon credits, we can save the endangered species or whatever the hell else baloney they're pushing, it's just not reality. Now, when I'm going to get into green development, sustainable development, and why I support sustainable development, and what the good thing is, and why I don't agree with pollution. I'm going to get into all that. And I'm going to get into habitat preservation and habitat enhancement and all that jazz. But the point is, what you have to understand is, a lot of this environmentalist horse shit is just basically a new religion. It's a new way for humanity to pretend that they're not part of nature. And that's my problem with environmentalism, as it tries to treat humanity as some sort of alien life form, instead of accepting the fact that humanity is part of nature, that humanity is natural, that we are a great ape, that we need to learn to live more in harmony with nature, and one of the keys to that is actually high technology, but nobody wants to see that. But let's move forward.
Saving endangered species is just one more arrogant attempt by humans to control nature. It's arrogant meddling. It's what got us in trouble in the first place. Doesn't anybody understand that? Interfering with nature. Over 90%, way over 90% of all the species that have ever...
Exactly, and what you need to understand is this is why I'm against the concept of invasive species. Every species is invasive to where it is now. There's no truly indigenous species anywhere. True, things have adapted, but their ancestors were invasive species to wherever they are now. But let's move on.
Lived on this planet, ever lived, are gone. They're extinct. We didn't kill them all. They just disappeared. That's what nature does. They disappear these days at the rate of 25 a day. And I mean regardless of our behavior. Irrespective of how we act on this planet, 25 species that were here today will be gone tomorrow. Let them go gracefully. Leave nature alone. Haven't we done enough? We're so self-important. So self-important. Everybody's going to save something now. Save the trees, save the bees, save the whales, save those snails. And the greatest arrogance of all, save the planet. What? Are these fucking people kidding me? Save the planet? We don't even know how to take care of ourselves yet. We haven't learned how to care for one another. We're going to save the fucking planet? I'm getting tired of that.
And that's what I'm going to get into, the concepts of biologic living and New England transcendentalism. I do plan on going somewhere with this series of videos.
Fucking Earth Day. I'm tired of these self-righteous environmentalists, these white bourgeois liberals who think the only thing wrong with this country is there aren't enough bicycle paths. People trying to make the world safe for their Volvos. Besides, environmentalists don't give a shit about the planet. They don't care about the planet. Not in the abstract, they don't. Not in the abstract, they don't. You know what they're interested in? A clean place to live. Their own habitat. They're worried that someday in the future they might be personally inconvenienced. Narrow, unenlightened self-interest doesn't impress me. Besides, there is nothing wrong with the planet. Nothing wrong with the planet. The planet is fine.
Pay careful attention to this, because he's making a very good point here. And it's the same point that Charles Manson made.
The people are fucked. Difference. The planet is fine. Compared to the people, the planet is doing great. It's been here 4.5 billion years. Did you ever think about the arithmetic? Planet has been here 4.5 billion years. We've been here, what, 100,000? Maybe 200,000? And we've only been engaged in heavy industry for a little over 200 years. 200 years versus 4.5 billion. And we have the conceit to think that somehow we're a threat? That somehow we're going to put in jeopardy this beautiful little blue-green ball that's just a-floating around the sun? The planet has been through a lot worse than us. Been through all kinds of things worse than us. Been through earthquakes, volcanoes, plate tectonics, continental drift, solar flares, sunspots, magnetic storms, the magnetic reversal of the poles, hundreds of thousands of years of bombardment by comets and asteroids and meteors, worldwide floods, tidal waves, worldwide fires, erosion, cosmic rays, recurring ice ages, and we...
Now, this is one of the problems that I have with climate alarmism, is one of the things that you have to stop believing if you believe in climate alarmism is the geological history of the Earth, the history of the Earth. You either have to go back to this frickin' biblical horse shit, or you have to accept the fact that there have been severe warming and severe cooling and severe changes in the atmosphere of the Earth over millions and millions of years, and that it predates the evolution of the human species, the existence of the human species. It predates it, and I think that it's a little arrogant to think otherwise, but we'll let George Carlin finish here. I didn't mean to stop him when he was on a roll.
Some plastic bags and some aluminum cans are going to make a difference? The planet isn't going anywhere. We are. We're going away. Pack your shit, folks. We're going away. And we won't leave much of a trace either. Thank God for that. Maybe a little styrofoam. Maybe. A little styrofoam. Planet will be here and we'll be long gone. Just another failed mutation. Just another closed-end biological mistake. An evolutionary cul-de-sac. The planet will shake us off like a bad case of fleas. A surface nuisance. You want to know how the planet's doing? Ask those people at Pompeii who are frozen into position from volcanic ash how the planet's doing. Want to know if the planet's all right? Ask those people in Mexico City or Armenia or 100 other places buried under thousands of tons of earthquake rubble if they feel like a threat to the planet this week. How about those people in Kilauea, Hawaii, who build their homes right next to an active volcano and then wonder why they have lava in the living room? The planet will be here for a long, long, long time after we're gone, and it will heal itself, it will cleanse itself, because that's what it does. It's a self-correcting system. The air and the water will recover, the earth will be renewed.
Exactly, but people don't recognize this, do they? They don't recognize that the ecology is self-correcting. Oh well.
And if it's true that plastic is not degradable, well, the planet will simply incorporate plastic into a new paradigm, the Earth plus plastic. The Earth doesn't share our prejudice towards plastic. Plastic came out of the Earth. The Earth probably sees plastic as just another one of its children. Could be the only reason the Earth allowed us to be spawned from it in the first place. It wanted plastic for itself. Didn't know how to make it. Needed us.
Will he customize and save $652 with Liberty Mutual?
Well, that was annoying. Here we go.
Didn't know how to make it. Needed us. Could be the answer to our age-old philosophical question, why are we here? Plastic. Assholes. So, the plastic is here. Our job is done. We can be phased out now. And I think that's really started already, don't you? I mean, to be fair, the planet probably sees us as a mild threat, something to be dealt with. And I'm sure the planet will defend itself in the manner of a large organism, like a beehive or an ant colony can muster a defense. I'm sure the planet will think of something. What would you do if you were the planet trying to defend against this pesky, troublesome species? Let's see. What might... viruses. Viruses might...
Now, this is something that I don't agree with. I do not agree. This is the problem. He's going over the same thing, trying to make it sound like humans are some kind of alien species. And I don't really dig that too much. But the thing is, let's let him finish, and I'll get into what I'm talking about later.
Be good. They seem vulnerable to viruses. And viruses are tricky, always mutating and forming new strains whenever a vaccine is developed. Perhaps this first virus could be one that compromises the immune system of these creatures. Perhaps a human immunodeficiency virus, making them vulnerable to all sorts of other diseases and infections that might come along. And maybe it could be spread sexually, making them a little reluctant to engage in the act of reproduction. Well, that's a poetic note. And it's a start. And I can dream, can't I? See, I don't worry about the little things. Bees, trees, whales, snails. I think we're part of a greater wisdom than we will ever understand. A higher order. Call it what you want. Know what I call it? The big electron. The big electron. Whoa. 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 It doesn't punish. It doesn't judge at all. It just is. And so are we, for a little while. Thanks for being here with me for a little while tonight.
So I think it'll actually be in my next video that I go over a couple physicists and what they have to say about climate change. But the one thing that we have to worry about is flawed climate models, okay? See, this idea that, and the concept that CO2 is a pollutant when CO2 is a necessary part of the carbon cycle. Keep that in mind. CO2 is a necessary part of the carbon cycle. Now, one of the biggest problems with these climate models is the measurement error. Imagine that you're timing a high school track athlete running 400 meters at the beginning of the school year, and you measure 56 seconds with your handheld stopwatch that reads plus 0.01 seconds. Imagine also that your reaction time is plus 0.2 seconds. With your equipment, you can measure an improvement of 53 seconds, but by the end of the year, the difference between the two times is far larger than the resolution of the stopwatch combined with your imperfect reaction time, allowing you to conclude that the runner is indeed now faster to get an idea of this runner's improvement. Meaning what it is, and I say this all the time, what we have to understand is we have an imperfect ape brain. Okay? And that's one of the things that we have to keep in mind. Our brain is imperfect. We have an imperfect animal brain. For now, until we find a way to fix that, and we will through technology, I think we will. But what you have to understand is there are flaws in how humans can perceive things. There's a limit to what we can perceive. So, let's see. To get an idea of this runner's improvement, you calculate, okay, blah, blah, blah. So, but if you try to retest the runner after half a week trying to measure can you measure such a small difference with the instrument at hand? No. There's no point in even trying because you'll have no way of discovering if the runner is faster. The size of what you are trying to measure is smaller than the size of the errors in your measurements. Scientists present measurement error by describing the range around their measurements. They might, for example, say that a temperature is 20 degrees Celsius plus 0.5 degrees Celsius. The temperature is probably 20 degrees Celsius, but it could reasonably be as high as 20.5 degrees Celsius or as low as 19.5 degrees Celsius. Now consider the temperatures that are recorded by weather stations around the world. Patrick Frank is a scientist at Stanford's synchrotron radiation light source, part of the SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory at Stanford University. Frank has published papers that explain how the errors in temperatures recorded by weather stations have been incorrectly handled. Temperatures reading, and this is what I love when they go like, it's the hottest day in August since 1642. Okay, it's just ridiculous. Based on this, Frank stated in 2011 article in Energy and Environment, the 1856 to 2004 global surface air temperature anomaly with its 95% confidence interval is 0.8% degrees Celsius plus 0.98 degrees Celsius. The error bars are wider than the measured increase. It looks as if there's an upward temperature trend, but we can't tell definitively. We cannot reject the hypothesis that the world's temperature has not changed at all. So we cannot reject the hypothesis that the world's temperature has not changed at all. One more time. We cannot reject the hypothesis that the world's temperature has not changed at all. The sun's energy. Climate models are used to assess the CO2 global warming hypothesis to quantify the human-caused CO2 fingerprint. How big is the human-caused CO2 fingerprint compared to other uncertainties in our climate model? For tracking energy flows in our model, we use watts per square meter. Watts per meter squared. The sun's energy that reaches the Earth's atmosphere provides 342 watts per meter squared. An average of day and night poles at the end equator, keeping it warm enough for us to thrive. The estimated extra energy from excess CO2, the annual anthropogenic greenhouse gas contribution, is far smaller. The anthropogenic greenhouse gas contribution is far smaller, according to Frank, at 0.036 watts per meter, okay, or 0.01% of the sun's energy. If our estimate of the sun's energy were off by more than 0.01%, that error would swamp the estimate extra energy from excess CO2. Unfortunately, the sun isn't the only uncertainty we need to consider. Cloud errors! Clouds reflect incoming radiation and also trap it as it is outgoing, and a world entirely encompassed by clouds would have a dramatically different atmospheric temperature, would have dramatically different atmospheric temperatures than one devoid of clouds. But modeling clouds and their effects has proven difficult. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the established global authority on climate change, acknowledges that this in its most recent assessment report in 2013. The situation of clouds and climate models remains challenging. There is very high confidence that uncertainties in cloud processes explain much of the spread in modeled climate sensitivity, bold in italics. What is the net effect of cloudiness? Clouds lead to a cooler atmosphere by reducing the sun's net energy by approximately 28 watts per meter, okay? Without clouds, more energy would reach the ground and our atmosphere would be much warmer. Why are clouds hard to model? They are amorphous. They reside at different altitudes and are layered on top of one another, making them hard to discern. They aren't solid. They come in many different types, and scientists don't fully understand how they form. As a result, clouds are modeled poorly. This contributes on average uncertainty of plus 4.0 watts per meter to the atmospheric thermal energy budget of simulated atmosphere during a projection of global temperature. This thermal uncertainty is 110 times as large as the estimated annual extra energy from excess CO2 if our climate models' calculation of clouds were off by just 0.9%. 0.036 is 0.9% of 4.0. That error would swamp the estimated extra energy from excess CO2. The total combined errors in our climate model are estimated to be about 150 watts per meter, which is over 4,000 times as large as the estimated annual extra energy from higher CO2 concentrations. Can we isolate such a faint signal? In our track athlete example, this equivalent blah, 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 blah. You can read this on your own. Other complications. Even the relationship between CO2 concentrations and temperature is complicated. The glacial record shows geological periods with rising CO2 and global cooling, and periods with low levels of atmospheric CO2 and global warming. Indeed, according to a 2001 article on climate research by astrophysicist and geoscientist Willie Soon and his colleagues, atmospheric CO2 tends to follow rather than lead temperature and biosphere changes, meaning CO2 fluctuations are after atmospheric conditions change. A large proportion of the warming that occurred in the 20th century occurred in the first half of the century, when the amount of anthropogenic CO2 in the air was 1/4 of the total amount there is now. The rate of warming then was very similar to the rate of warming recently. We can't have it both ways. The current warming can't be unambiguously caused by anthropogenic CO2 emissions if an earlier period experienced the same type of warming without the offending emissions. Climate model secret sauce. It turns out that climate models aren't plug and chug. Numerous inputs are not the direct result of scientific studies. Researchers need to discover them through parameter adjustment, or tuning as it is called. If a climate model uses a grid of 25 by 25 kilometer boxes to divide the atmosphere and oceans into manageable chunks, storm clouds and low marine clouds off the California coast will be too small to model directly. Instead, according to a 2016 Science article by journalist Paul Vussen, modelers need to tune for cloud formation in each key grid based on temperature, atmospheric stability, humidity, and the presence of mountains. Modelers continue tuning climate models until they match a known 20th century temperature or precipitation record. And yet, at that point, we will have to ask whether these models are more subjective than objective. If a model shows a decline in Arctic sea ice, for instance, and we know that Arctic sea ice has in fact declined, is the model telling us something new, or just regurgitating its adjustments? Climate model errors. Before we put too much credence in any climate model, we need to assess its predictions. The following points highlight some of the difficulties of current models. Vancouver, British Columbia warmed by a full degree in the first 20 years of the 20th century, then cooled by 2 degrees over the next 40 years, and then warmed to the end of the century, ending almost where it started. None of the 6 climate models tested by the IPCC reproduced this pattern. Further, according to scientist Patrick Frank in 2015, in a 2015 article in Energy and Environment, the projected temperature trends of the models, which all employed the same theories and historical data, were as far apart as 2.5 degrees. Okay, so that's more of a fluctuation, I believe, if I remember. That's more of a fluctuation than what you started with. According to 2002 article by climate scientist Vitaly Semenov and Lennart Benget, whatever, in Climate Dynamics, climate models have done a poor job of matching known global rainfall totals. Keep that in mind. Climate models have done poor in matching global rainfall totals. I think we need the guys from the Farmer's Almanac to start doing this stuff. They're pretty good. Climate models have been subjected to perfect model tests, in which the they were used to. I can't believe this is the Hoover Institute. In which they were used to project a reference climate, and then with some minor tweaks to initial conditions, recreate temperatures in that same reference climate. That this is basically asking a model to do the same thing twice, a task for which it should be ideally suited. In these tests, Frank found that the results in the first year correlated very well between the 2 runs, but years 2 to 9 showed such poor correlation that the results could have been random. Failing a perfect model test shows that the results aren't stable and suggests a fundamental inability of the models to predict the climate. The ultimate test for a climate model is the accuracy of its predictions, but the models predicted that there would be greater warming between 1998 and 2014 than actually happened. If the models were doing a good job, their predictions would cluster symmetrically around the actual measured temperatures. That was not the case there or here. A mere 2.4% of the predictions undershot actual temperatures, and 97.6% overshot. Okay, according to Cato Institute climatologist Patrick Michaels, former MIT meteorologist Richard Lindzen, and Cato Institute climate researcher Chip Knappenberger, climate models as a group have been running hot, meaning they're running hot. They're predicting hotter than it is. Okay, predicting about 2.2 times as much warming as actually occurred. So they're predicting 2.2 times as much warming than is actually occurring and has occurred from 1998 to 2014. Of course, this doesn't mean that no warming is occurring, but rather that the model's forecasts were exaggerated. The point is, though, warming and cooling and 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 warming and cooling has happened over the whole geologic history of the Earth. Conclusions: if someone with a handheld stopwatch, blah, blah, blah. Okay. As Willie Soon and his co-authors found our current lack of understanding of the Earth's climate system does not allow us to determine reliably the magnitude of climate change that will be caused by anthropogenic CO2 emissions, let alone whether this change will be for the better or the worse. And I'm going to end this video right here, and then I'm going to make a part 2 and however many I need to cover the data, the information that I have in the description. But this will be linked in the description. Feel free to follow it, and that's all for this video.